Professor Jensen, earlier you mentioned that although there are 10,000 tariff lines for goods, there are only the 30 categories for services. Could you perhaps discuss whether it would be helpful in some respect to have disaggregation of those 30 into, so we end up with 100 or whatever the number would be, and just what work, if any, is being done to try to provide that elaboration? If we came back and met in 10 years, would we still just be looking at 30 categories with data available quarterly? Thanks.
Yeah, for someone like me, having more detail available for what is actually being traded in services would be hugely beneficial. And I think it would support the kind of policy dialogue that we're talking about today. To know beyond, is it financial services or engineering services or medical services? Those are pretty big buckets. To know what within it is being traded and where the producers are and where the customers are, that would be hugely beneficial to us understanding the implications of services trade to the domestic economy, to the domestic labor force, to workers and firms in the United States. I think it is a huge gap in our understanding of our economy. I am not optimistic about the prospects for 10 years from now there being more than 30 categories. Think about the mechanism where we collect merchandise trade is through ports. And it's tariffs. It's because of the administration of tariffs that firms have to fill out detailed customs forms, right? There is no analog to that administrative process for the architect, for the doctor, for the lawyer. There is no port. So the way the U.S. statistical system has to collect this data, it's not a shipper's export declaration. It's not an import declaration, which we have, tens of millions of every year, import and export transactions, right? For services, there is no port. So for historical reasons, the Bureau of Economic Analysis collects this data, and they are woefully under-resourced to do this, both in terms of financial resources, but also in terms of kind of statistical infrastructure. BEA is not a data collection agency, really. But for some reason, they collect data on trade and services. So they administer surveys to the firms probably that are sitting around the room here, and it asks for these 30 categories and asks for half a dozen or so countries and regions, what do you export to where? And that's it. And undoubtedly, your firms are angry at the burden that this imposes. So you don't fill it out, or you squawk and say, there's too much, this form is too long. So what are the prospects for getting more than 30 categories? You tell me. I don't think it's good. So I would propose that data collection activity move from the BEA to the Census Bureau. I think that would be a big step forward. And then resource it up if we're serious about this. But until that happens, maybe 10 years from now we'll have 33.